You don't need I'm doing this my way.
He a legend, he a legend, he a legend. He a legend, he a legend, he a legend. He a legend. Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of Iron. Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of Iron.
Pico money, Pico money, Pico money. We make it Pico money. Big game, about to throw a rack.
About to throw a rack on Korea, not China, like the song normally says. What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and in today's video, we're going to talk about the LCK playoffs. So, the only team that I have a bet on to win the split at this point is DRX. I had bets on Nongshim and KT Rolster in the beginning of the season. They both failed to make playoffs. But for DRX, I bet $20 at plus 6,600. So that's, if they win, I win 1,340 minus the two other bets is like 1,300 or minus it's 1,280 would be the profit. So throughout the playoffs, I'm going to look for an opportunity to bet against DRX in order to get my money back. Or to secure a profit. That's basically what the idea is. The reason why I bet on DRX in the beginning of the season is because I believed in the talent of their roster. And that's, in general, how I make decisions for which teams I like and which teams I don't like. So we have Kingen. Kingen's a pretty good player. He's not a transformative player. He's not the best top laner in the LCK, but he's serviceable and he'll do fine in most matchups. I don't think that he is a liability for the most part. Piosik is a very good jungler. I think that Piosik showed that in 2020 when his roster was actually good. Not only could he be a starter in the LCK, but he could carry games, and he carried some games at Worlds. Yes, he had a very good team, but he was a big part of their wins at Worlds. So I have a lot of respect for Piosik. Then we have Zika. Zika is a player that has a very good pedigree. Koma thought highly enough of him to bring him over to China on Vici Gaming, and then he played okay once Koma was gone. And now, he's returning to form again, where he's a solid player. He's not the best mid laner in the LCK right now, but he's a very good mid laner in my opinion. I believe that if he stayed in the LPL or if he went, anywhere else in the world, he would be thought of as a top, an upper echelon talent-wise player. And his ceiling is definitely there. I have a lot of faith in Zika long term. Still a very young player. I think about 20 now. Deft's one of the best AD carries of all time. And he actually had a really strong early part of the split. There were a lot of question marks surrounding Deft after his performance from last year. But he's obviously... his performance last year at Worlds, which was like a little lackluster. But overall, I think we still understand that Deft is a good player. And this split... he's looked pretty good. And Barrel's a big piece coming over from Damwon. Was definitely the better player out of Ghost and Barrel. I think I've been pretty consistent in saying that. When they used to play like Senna Pantheon and Senna and like interesting support champions, that's because Barrel had the ability to do that. Ghost on Senna, yes, she scaled insanely hard into the late game, but she isn't going to carry your team the same way that a champion like Jinx or Aphelios is going to, and we saw that Nongshim had some difficulties with Ghost as their AD carry because he is somewhat limited from a hyper carry perspective. But let's take a look at the rest of everything that's going on in the playoffs. So the first matchup that we have is Damwon Kia against Fredit Brion. So Damwon is let's get to the screen. Damwon is a minus 455 favorite, meaning if you bet $455 on Damwon to beat Fredit Brion, you win $100. If you bet $100 on Fredit Brion, you win $323. So obviously the first thing that we think is, well, Damwon is the better team. They beat them earlier in the season, but then Fredit Brion won the rematch in week 9, which gave them a chance to get into playoffs, even though they forfeited a match, which is pretty impressive. So let's go through the lane by lane. So Morgan against Birdall. I am a pretty big Morgan fan. I liked him when he was in the LPL. I liked him when he came over to the LCK. He has underperformed in the LCK. He looked like a liability at Worlds when he was on Homolife. I think he still definitely has a lot of talent. But on the other side, we have Birdall. And Birdall, you can kind of say all of the same nice things that you'd want to say about Morgan in terms of having high upside. And you can ascribe that to Birdall as well. Birdall is an even younger player, has a very high ceiling. There's a reason why Damwon believes in Birdall, and you have to kind of trust that Damwon has good talent evaluation. And, I have no reason to second guess that. The question of whether or not he fits nicely into the team, that's a different question, and maybe he doesn't. Maybe having Canyon and Showmaker with a highly variant top laner isn't the best idea. That's very possible. And also with having Diokdom, who was a better late game carry than Ghost, like maybe those things just don't line up. It's definitely a possibility. If they ask Birdall to kind of like tone it down a little bit, play like not passive, but play a more consistent style of League of Legends, maybe that would be better for Damwon's long-term winning chances. In the jungle, we have Umti and Canyon. I know that LS put out a video recently saying that Umti was one of the top 5 junglers in the LCK, but another takeaway I had from that video, I didn't watch the entire thing, but I watched the beginning of it, and LS was kind of saying that he thinks that the talent level in the LCK is kind of struggling right now, but I think that might just have more to do with the amount of parity that we've seen in the LCK. There have been a lot of upsets, and there have been a lot of surprises just in general with how teams have been able to compete with one another and keep matches close. So for someone like LS, I know he has a very dogmatic way of looking at things, which I'm not trying to criticize LS. He's obviously very good at what he does. But, the idea that the better team should always win so emphatically, and if they don't win emphatically, then they're kind of not playing as well. Or like there's some negative connotation with that. I don't know if I'd really agree with that. I think that the talent level of a player is pretty static. So if LS had a high opinion of some of these players previously, I think that he still should. I know he mentioned some of the players have left or aren't playing right now, and that's fine. But a lot of these players are still better than league average, or even some of the upper echelon players in the West, and a lot of the mid tier players in the LPL. But for a player like Umti, do we think that a team that needs Umti to play well is going to do that against someone like Canyon and Damwon Kia? I think that's probably the biggest difficulty I have with this matchup, is there aren't many drafts that I can think of that Fred Brion can force Damwon into that will give Umti a large advantage over Canyon. So can Damwon draft themselves into a corner for an entire series? I think it's definitely possible, but is it much better than the 20 to 30% implied win rate that you have for Fred Brion? And I'd say probably not. So if Damwon drafts even B tier drafts, I think that in that scenario maybe it's like a 60-40 where Fred Brion has much better odds than the line. But I'm not betting against Damwon at this point. So in the mid lane, we have Lava and Showmaker. Showmaker is one of the best mid laners in the world. If you're somebody who believes in Lava and Fred Brion, then go ahead, bet on them. Fred Brion, and I've said this in multiple videos recently, Fred Brion is a team I don't have a good feel for. These middle and bottom tier LCK teams, I generally don't watch their matches. Just from time purposes. I work a full-time job, and when I catch some other Eastern League of Legends, it's normally the LPL or big matches in the LCK. So this could be a blind spot for me. It's very possible. And then we have Henna and Delight against Diokdom and Kellen. And I know Diokdom and Kellen are coming in as two players that we don't really trust and consider full Damwon Kia players anymore. They don't get the benefit of the doubt in the sense that they're world champions. It's really only Canyon and Showmaker that are left from that. But I really do think that Diokdom is an upgrade over Ghost Is Kellen an upgrade over Beryl? That remains to be seen. I would say probably not. So it's really on Damwon Kia to kind of get everything together for the playoffs. Will that happen? I don't know, but my pick would be Damwon there. The next match is DRX against Kwangdong. So I definitely think that DRX is going to win. Bunch of noise is going on. I don't know what that's all about. But so DRX against Kwangdong. So like since I have the chance, I can't bet on this yet. I can't hedge against it yet. Like I'm not gonna put a couple $100 on Kwangdong to beat DRX. I don't think that's the right play. It sounds like running water, but it's probably somebody downstairs. Whatever. I'm pot committed at this point. So with DRX against Kwangdong, this is a spot where I'm just gonna let my money ride. I'm not gonna bet on Kwangdong Freaks. So not much I want to say about this matchup. I think that DRX should be the team that is favored in this matchup. Is Keen good enough to completely demolish Kingen in lane? Yes. Do I think that DRX is going to let that happen? Knowing that fact, you're not going to go into these drafts allowing Keen to just completely to get the better side of matchups. Like you're going to be conservative with your draft, and you're probably going to try to get red side. I think that DRX would most likely have side selection at least in the first game, which should benefit Kingen as well. Piosik against Elam, I think that Piosik is just a much better jungler, so that's a big advantage. I think that having the better jungler in most matches can be enough to win the match for you. Zika against Fate, I think that Zika is the more talented player. That's just been my read for the past probably year and a half, 2 years. I know that Fate has had some good performances, but I think Zika is more consistent. The one problem I do have with Zika, and this may have just been with the coaches that he's had in the past, they generally put him on like these, not utility, but like mid laners that are intended to help the rest of the team and not necessarily prioritize themselves. If they continuously do that, then DRX they run the risk of drafting themselves into positions where they don't have enough damage out of mid lane. So that's one thing I'm slightly concerned about, especially with how the meta is treating 80 carries right now. It sounds like somebody's sloshing around downstairs. Maybe somebody's taking a bath. I don't know. So Defton Beryl against Teddy and Hoyt. Teddy's a legitimate player. I don't have any doubts that Teddy can win lane against Defton Beryl. It's just the cumulative advantage is definitely on DRX's side. I'm hoping that DRX wins and that they advance. So if that happens and we get into the semifinals, we'll have reseeding. First seed chooses which quarterfinal winner they will want to play. So T1 will either be able to play Damwon Kia or DRX. I'm assuming they would pick DRX. I think that T1 is going to win that matchup. And this is the problem. Like T1 does look extremely good right now. LS said that he thought that Zeus was one of the best top laners. I think that is probably recency bias. I don't think that Zeus is as good as LS does. You're going to look better when your team is constantly winning. I still think that there are better top laners in the LCK, specifically Kana. And I know Kana, his team played bad this split, or poorly this split. But if you ask T1 who would you rather have, Zeus or Kana, I bet they'd say Kana. Unless it's like a salary issue where they don't want to pay him as much money as he deserves, which is a lot of money because he's very good. In the jungle, Owner against Piosik. I think that Piosik is on the same level as Owner. I think that, again, when you're surrounded by extremely good players, you're going to look like an extremely good jungler. When Piosik was surrounded by, I think it was Doran, Chovy, Deft, like Piosik looked extremely good. So you have to. I think that if you swapped out Piosik and Owner, T1 would be a similar team. And that might be a hot take. I don't really know. Zika against Faker. Faker is the greatest player of all time, and Zika is not Faker. So that means that T1 has an advantage in the mid lane. There's not much more to say about that. And then Gumayusi and Keria. I think that Keria is the best support player in the world. I'm a huge Keria fan. He just won MVP, I think. Good for him. That's really cool. Still a very good, very young player. I think that Gumayusi and Keria are definitely better than Deft and Beryl. So you have top lane's probably closer than people think. Jungle's probably closer than people think. Mid lane is also probably closer than people think, but definitely Faker favored. And then Gumayusi and Keria. I think that's probably the biggest advantage that T1 has in terms of talent is against Deft and Beryl, because like stylistically, I think that Gumayusi and Keria are going to be the aggressive side of the matchups, which we will see them being like the focal point of the team, I think, in playoffs if we see T1 against DRX. Then in the other semifinals, we have Gen.G against DRX, and I'm a huge Gen.G fan. I think that their team is extremely good from a talent perspective, and I think that if they go up against Damwon, like I do like Damwon's future prospects. I think that they could be very good after summer and like going into Worlds. But in this matchup specifically, I think that Gen.G definitely has the advantage. Doran is a more consistent player than Birdall, which is advantageous in the draft. And in a longer series, like they can basically play top lane straightforward and not put themselves into a bad position in the draft because they don't have to take that additional risk. Whereas Damwon might feel like, Chovy against Showmaker, not going to create a huge advantage there. Peanut against Canyon. They might think that they can create a large advantage against Peanut, but I have a lot of faith in Peanut. Diokdom and Kellen against Ruler and the Hens, you're not really going to attack that position either. So Damwon might be picking very aggressive top laners to try to attack Doran. Doran's a kind of player who can deal with that, and it's going to force Damwon to play hyper aggressive on the top half of the map, where even if Gen.G opts into that and is playing the more passive side of matchups, they can still win, and they're going to have the easier to execute compositions probably. Having Peanut on your team, you could always draft like highly volatile junglers where the games get very slowed down. So if it's like a high octane, like super aggressive Damwon Kia, they could just run over Gen.G if they're allowed to be the side that has tempo in every single game. But I think that Gen.G is good enough to outscale Damwon in a lot of situations. So we'll have Damwon being hyper aggressive, Gen.G playing a little slower, and then Ruler will outplay Damwon Kia in the mid to late game. So for my money, I would want to be on Gen.G. I don't know what the money line is in this situation. I would assume that it's probably like minus 160 when if Gen.G plays against Damwon. I think it would be about minus 160. And at that number, I would consider playing that number, and anything closer, I'd probably want to jump on. And then in the finals, we would have T1 against Gen.G. And if it gets to T1 against Gen.G in the finals, I'm going to feel obligated to play Gen.G. I know that T1 looks dominant, and we're not going to have any reason to think that they're not going to win if they make it to the finals, but that's just kind of how you have to play it. I think that Zeus against Doran, that can go either way. Peanut against Owner. Peanut is a very experienced player. I think that they could get themselves into like low volatility games where everything's going to come down to a 25 to 30 minute team fight, where there's like maybe a 2k gold advantage one way or the other. And I think that Ruler is good enough to win those matchups. I'm not saying that he has like a huge advantage over Gumayusi in that situation, but if we come out of the finals with Ruler being the one that wins MVP because he just had like a crazy best of 5, then I wouldn't be surprised at all because he's one of the best 80 carries in the world, and so is Gumayusi. But it's a lot easier for people to get to that point mentally with Gumayusi because his team has been on fire recently. So I think that my pick for the LCK finals, I do think that T1 is the most likely team to win, but I will be actively rooting for DRX because if they win, I win money. And for Gen G, because I want to see that upset, I think that Gen G has a very high ceiling and is going to be a legitimate contender for Worlds again. So that's basically it. If you want to support the channel, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. If you want to bet on props, check out Thrive Fantasy. They don't have anything for the LCK, but they have it for the LEC and the LCS. Using the promo code PIKEL, you get a 100% deposit match up to $100. And then once you play in the contest, you get two $20 entries if you deposit over $10. And then if you deposit $100, you get four $20 contest entries. So it's a pretty good promotion over there. But that's all I got for you today. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.